When we stand at the edge of our own history and look back at the path we've traveled, something profound happens. It's not just nostalgia. It's not simply remembering. It's a complete recalibration of understanding. In that moment of reflection, we forced to confront a fundamental truth that shapes every aspect of our existence. We are not meant to navigate this world alone. Today, I want to share with you a realization that has emerged from years of experience, research, and deep introspection. This is about the absolute necessity of human connection, the irreplaceable value of certain individuals in our lives, and why recognizing this truth is not just emotionally important, but scientifically essential. Let me start with a simple statement that carries enormous weight. Some people are not just important to us. They are essential. They are the infrastructure upon which our entire cognitive, emotional, and functional architecture is built. And when we finally understand this, when we truly see it with clarity, we realize that maintaining their presence isn't optional. It's a fundamental requirement for optimal human function. The neuroscience here is absolutely clear and unambiguous. Our brains are not isolated processes operating independently. They are dynamic, living networks that are shaped continuously and profoundly by our interactions with others. Think about mirror neurons for a moment. These are specialized brain cells that fire both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing that same action. They create a neural resonance, a kind of empathetic connection that directly influences our decision-making and emotional regulation. But it goes deeper than that. Oche-yan, consider the neurochemistry of connection. When we are with people who matter to us, people we trust and feel safe with, our brains release a cascade of powerful chemicals. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, floods our system. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter of reward and motivation, surges. This regulates mood and well-being, stabilizes at optimal levels. These aren't just feel-good chemicals. They are the molecular currency of survival and growth. Here's what's fascinating, and perhaps even unsettling. Absence is equally powerful from a neurological standpoint. When someone who truly matters is missing from our lives, these systems don't just go dormant. They actively create stress. The brain starts highlighting the missing piece constantly. It's like having a critical error message running in the background of your consciousness all the time. Amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, becomes hyperactive. Your prefrontal cortex, responsible for complex thinking and planning, starts operating in a degraded mode. This is why when we look back at our past and realize someone's absence, it's not just an emotional pang. It's our entire nervous system sending us urgent diagnostic data. This component is missing, and the system cannot run optimally without it. I've observed this pattern repeatedly in my work with teams, partnerships, and collaborative ventures. When a critical presence is absent, whether it's a key engineer, a trusted advisor, or an emotional anchor, the entire system degrades. Decision-making latency increases. People take longer to make choices, and those choices are often more conservative, less innovative. Creativity diminishes noticeably. The collective capacity to take necessary risks shrinks dramatically. Everyone becomes more cautious, more risk-averse, more suboptimal in their performance. But here's the remarkable thing. When that presence is reintroduced, when that critical person returns to the system, something almost magical happens. Neural pathways in the group dynamic light up. Brain imaging studies would show increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region associated with planning and complex thought. Confidence returns, not as a vague feeling, but as a measurable enhancement in cognitive function and output. What does this mean in practical human terms? It means that some people don't just support us emotionally. They optimize us. They optimize us neurologically, making our brains function better. They optimize us morally, helping us make better ethical decisions. And they optimize us strategically, enabling us to see paths forward that we couldn't see alone. Their presence becomes a stabilizing axis, like a gyroscope around which genuine personal and professional growth can revolve and accelerate. And when we recognize this truth too late, after critical moments have already passed, the clarity that comes is often accompanied by sharp, almost painful urgency. Think about it this way. Your life is a complex system, like a sophisticated machine or a intricate computer program. Some components in that system are optional. You can swap them out, upgrade them, or remove them entirely without catastrophic failure. But other components are absolutely critical. Remove them, and the entire system crashes or operates in such a degraded state that it's barely functional. Certain people in our lives are those critical components. They're not luxury features, they're core infrastructure, and the analysis of our past shows us, with brutal clarity, the cost of their absence. We see the lost time, the degraded decisions, the missed opportunities. We cannot afford another moment of that absence if we want to operate at our full potential. So, this realization of need, this moment of clarity, where we understand someone's indispensability, is the first vital step in correcting the system's parameters. But this recognition isn't simple or one-dimensional. It's deeply layered and fundamentally emotional because it touches the very core of human attachment and trust. Let me take you into the psychology for a moment. Attachment theory, developed through decades of rigorous research, demonstrates something profound about human nature. When we're faced with reminders of past neglect or loss, this isn't just a subjective feeling. Brain imaging shows that the amygdala activates more intensely, processing both fear and desire simultaneously. Meanwhile, the hippocampus, our brain's memory center, works to map the emotional context of those past events with extraordinary precision. You're not just remembering the events themselves, you're reliving their emotional signature. You're feeling, in real time, the weight of what was missing and the relief of what was present. When I personally reflect on my own past, I don't merely remember actions or events in sequence. I remember their emotional weight. I recall the subtlety of a silence that should have been filled with someone's voice. I remember the specific warmth of attention when it was given, how it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. I remember the quiet reassurance of a steady presence, how it anchored me when everything else was chaos. The insight that emerges from this kind of reflection isn't passive longing or wistful nostalgia. It's an active imperative. It's a command derived from data. The data shows that some people architect our emotional infrastructure in ways that persist far beyond our conscious awareness. They're like foundational code in a software system. Their absence leaves voids that no substitute, no other person or thing can adequately fill. And conversely, their presence actively restores equilibrium to a system that is otherwise thrown into imbalance. Let me give you a concrete example from real experience. I recall a specific period where collaboration, trust, and mutual understanding were tested to the absolute extreme. We had projects on the line that demanded peak creativity and resilience, and those projects faltered. To fully grasp the importance of this, we need to consider the rule of shared history, which is the substrate upon which this entire imperative is built. Memory is not a simple static record of events, like entries in a log file or photographs in an album. It's a dynamic, reconstructive process constantly being edited and reshaped by emotion, personal significance, and the relational context in which those memories are formed and recalled. When we revisit the past, we're not merely playing back a recording, yet we are actively perceiving, in that moment, how those past experiences shaped our internal narrative, our core beliefs, and our decision-making frameworks. We're reverse engineering our own development, trying to understand how we became who we are. The people who were physically and emotionally present during formative moments occupy unique neural emotional niches that are, for all practical purposes, impossible to replicate. They're tied into the very structure of those memories. As a result, they exert a continuing influence on our stress responses, on our moral reasoning, and on our capacity for both joy and vulnerability. They are part of the operating system, not just applications we can uninstall and replace. When we realize through clear-eyed reflection that these specific presences are irreplaceable components of our system, the appeal for them to stay close undergoes a fundamental shift. It transcends mere preference or convenience. It becomes an operational necessity, as critical as oxygen or water. The past, therefore, is not simply a story we tell ourselves for entertainment or comfort. It's a diagnostic tool. It runs the scans and highlights in stark relief the specific people and interaction patterns that sustain us at the deepest, most structural level. Yeah. Emotionally, this diagnostic recognition touches the absolute core of human attachment and vulnerability. Loneliness, even when surrounded by others, is acutely amplified by the absence of these critical relational anchors. Psychologists have a term for this: the attachment gap. It's the measurable space between our innate, hardwired need for secure relational bonds and the fluctuating reality of relational presence in our lives. When we have the courage to acknowledge, I need you, we essentially mapping our internal emotional economy. We're identifying where the deficits exist, where the resources are depleted, and we're articulating a specific targeted solution grounded in relational continuity and proximity. This act of mapping and asking is not weakness, despite what our culture might sometimes suggest. It's precisely the kind of courage required to navigate increasingly complex human ecosystems with authenticity, transparency, and ethical engagement. Asking someone to stay close is the explicit acknowledgement that their presence is indispensable, not only to subjective emotional well-being, but to the optimization of every dimension of functional life: cognitive, ethical. It's stating clearly that they are a non-optional part of the stack, a critical component without which the system cannot achieve its potential. This fundamental recognition that some presences are foundational infrastructure rather than optional features forces us to confront our own, often counterproductive patterns. We must look honestly at our tendencies toward avoidance, our susceptibility to distraction, and our chronic underappreciation of constancy. And too often, we're captivated by novelty. We chase the new, the shiny, the exciting. We're driven by raw ambition or seduced by the shallow validation of external metrics: likes, followers, status symbols, achievements that look impressive on paper. And in that pursuit, we fail to maintain the necessary proximity to the very people whose constancy defines our systemic resilience. We deprioritize the core in favor of the peripheral. Then conflicts that would normally be resolved quickly start festering. There's a measurable decrease in group resilience and a palpable emotional fatigue. The system operates in degraded mode, and everyone feels it even if they can't articulate why. Conversely, when that specific presence returns, a subtle but powerful reorganization occurs spontaneously. It's like watching a chaotic system suddenly find its equilibrium. Decision-making accelerates because consensus is easier to reach. High-clicker bandwidth expands because less energy is spent on internal coordination and conflict management. Emotional regulation improves because a stabilizing element is back online. This is the human phenomenon that is too often overlooked in celebrating individual highs and lone genius. The myth of the self-made person, the solitary genius, is just that, a myth. The people we fundamentally rely on do so much more than offer comfort or companionship. They are catalysts that enable reactions that wouldn't otherwise occur. They are amplifiers that increase the gain on capabilities. They are stabilizers that dampen oscillations and keep the system on course. Recognizing the immense value only late, in retrospect, is one of the most poignant and costly human experiences. But the clarity that emerges from staring at the past is simultaneously humbling because it shows our era, and motivating because it shows the solution. If someone has proven themselves to be indispensable through the hard data of lived experience, through the evidence of multiple situations where their presence made the difference, then maintaining the achievement is non-negotiable. It's a critical system parameter that we must optimize and protect. There is also a profound temporal dimension to this realization that we need to explore. Life is inherently uncertain, defined by constant change, unpredictability, and the relentless forward momentum of time itself. We are always moving into an unknown future, unable to see more than a few steps ahead. Neuroscience shows us something fascinating about how we navigate this uncertainty. Our episodic memory, our capacity to project ourselves backward to reconstruct and simulate past experiences, actually functions as a primary predictive tool. It allows us to model potential future outcomes based on our relational history. It's a simulation engine built into our consciousness. So when we carefully examine the past and recognize the critical causal role someone has played, we in essence running a simulation of the future without their presence. And we can see with astonishing predictive clarity what that future looks like. The slower decisions, the increased friction, the missed opportunities, the emotional instability, the cognitive degradation. That mental simulation produces an urgent signal. It generates a cognitive and emotional imperative that cannot be ignored. Proximity, engagement, and intentionality, are now longer optional variables we can adjust lightly. They are essential inputs for the desired future outcome. I need you. Please stay close is thus not just a statement of present desire, a current feeling. It's a strategic alignment with both emotional intelligence and the active optimization of life trajectories. It's choosing the right path in the simulation. It's making the decision that future you will thank you for. Let's also explore the rule of vulnerability in this context, as it's often profoundly misunderstood in our culture. Vulnerability is routinely mischaracterized as a weakness, as a crack in the AM, as something to be hidden or overcome. Yet research in positive psychology and relational neuroscience demonstrates the exact opposite. Studies show that vulnerability is the essential medium, the conductive layer through which trust, attachment, and authentic relational bonds are created and strengthened. The prefrontal cortex, when engaged in intentional, emotionally transparent interactions, directly facilitates greater empathy, more accurate risk assessment, and more effective collaborative problem solving. By acknowledging need, by articulating dependence in measured, conscious ways, we're not surrendering power. We're activating the deepest relational dynamics, those that forge connection and build resilience. In effect, vulnerability becomes a sophisticated tool for system optimization. It strengthens the neural pathways associated with advanced social cognition. It enhances our overall emotional regulation by allowing us to process and integrate difficult feelings rather than suppressing them. And it fosters more ethical, aware decision-making by keeping us connected to our interdependence rather than trapped in illusions of self-sufficiency. Asking someone to stay close, therefore, is simultaneously an act of courage, a sound neurobiological strategy, and a clear ethical imperative. It takes courage to admit need. It's strategically wise because it optimizes our cognitive and emotional function. And it's ethical because it honors the truth of human interdependence. The principle we're discussing is reinforced everywhere you look in history, in literature, in lived experience. Consider the most productive partnerships in science. Watson and Crick discovering DNA structure, but unable to do it without Rosalind Franklin's crystallography work. In exploration, Lewis and Clark, each bringing essential but different skills to their journey. In innovation, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, visionary and engineer, creating something neither could have built alone. There are always critical individuals, sometimes operating behind the scenes, who shape outcomes in profound, defining ways. Their absence is immediately felt as a drop in productivity, a stall in innovation, a fraying of emotional cohesion. When their influence is restored, you see entire systems, teams, projects, personal trajectories reorient themselves toward optimal function. It's not magic. It's not mysticism. It's the system recognizing a key component has been reintegrated. This principle translates directly and powerfully into human relationships at every scale, from intimate partnerships to professional collaborations to friendships. The individuals whose constancy truly matters are rarely, if ever, replaceable. Their presence amplifies potential far beyond what is immediately visible on the surface. Therefore, staring at the past is more than reminiscence or nostalgia. It's a vital form of systems analysis, a diagnostic reflection that identifies not only failures and bottlenecks, but, more importantly, the the essential relational assets. To recognize this and to act decisively on it is to align strategy, emotion, ethics in the most human and consequential way possible. And yet there is a required artistry to maintaining closeness once it's recognized as essential. It's not enough to simply declare the need. The declaration is just the initial command, the first line of code. One must then cultivate the consistent processes, consistency in engagement, empathy and interaction, and a commitment to align growth. Neuroscience supports this through the study of what's called relational plasticity. The brain adapts to patterns of interaction. It reinforces reward circuits when engagement is predictable and positive, creating neural pathways that make connection easier and more natural over time. And it produces acute stress responses when alignment falters or signals become inconsistent. The people who are most essential to us perceive these patterns intuitively. They're sensitive to the signal. They can feel when we're truly present versus when we're just going through the motions. They respond to authenticity and deep engagement. And they will withdraw, often necessarily for their own protection from inconsistency or neglect. Thus, the imperative to maintain proximity is both a moral duty and a strategic necessity. It's not only for the psyche, but for the integrity and performance of the entire relational system, which exists to amplify mutual growth, emotional health, and cognitive function. This is why intentionality in relationships, purposeful presence, active listening, the pursuit of shared goals is every bit as critical as the initial thunderclap moment of recognition. The infrastructure must be actively maintained. You can't just build it once and walk away. It requires constant care, attention, and investment. Think of it like tending a garden. The initial planting is important, but it's the daily watering, the regular weeding, the seasonal pruning that determines whether you have a thriving ecosystem or a patch of dead earth. This imperative resonates on a level that transcends pure cognition. Humans are our foundation, relational creatures. We are wired for connection, for attunement, for reciprocity. Our emotional systems, from the amygdala to the anterior insula, are built to respond to both absence and presence with high intensity. The realization that someone is indispensable produces a powerful blend of longing, appreciation, and urgency. This is a neurochemical signal, a primal alert that primes our entire organism for action. It's your body saying, "This matters, pay attention, do something." Staring at the past crystallizes that diffuse signal into a clear, actionable instruction. If the person who matters most is not near, the cognitive and emotional cost to the system is tangible, measurable. Acting to restore proximity, therefore, is not an optional lifestyle choice or nice to have. It's the necessary alignment of instinct, intellect, and ethical responsibility. To ask someone to stay close is to openly recognize the profound interdependence that sustains all human flourishing. But recognition and a single request are insufficient. Awareness is merely the first step in the loop. Sustaining that essential presence requires continuous courage, deliberate intentionality, and deep humility. Human relationships are dynamic systems, constantly shifting in response to external stress, new opportunities, and internal personal growth. They are not static. They are living, breathing, evolving entities. Neuroscience shows us that chronic neglect, even when unintentional, produces concrete changes in the brain's reward and attachment circuitry. Dopamine pathways associated with seeking and anticipation weaken, making us less motivated to connect. Oxytocin signaling, which facilitates banding cheese, making connection feel less rewarding. Prefrontal regulation of emotion is compromised, making us more reactive and less able to navigate relational challenges skillfully. In stark contrast, consistent engagement, genuine attentiveness, and authentic responsiveness reinforce these very circuits, creating a fertile relational ecosystem in which both individuals can truly thrive. The brain literally rewires itself around patterns of positive connection. To ask someone to stay close is therefore to commit to the active co-creation and maintenance of this ecosystem, with the understanding that presence is both a priceless gift and a serious ongoing responsibility. There have been moments in my life when I've had this exact realization hit me like a freight train. I've looked back and seen, with painful clarity, the times when someone crucial was there and I didn't fully appreciate it. I was distracted, focused on the wrong things, taking their presence for granted. And I've also seen the times when they weren't there, and I could trace a direct line from their absence to decisions I made poorly, opportunities I missed, pain I could have avoided. The data is undeniable when you're willing to look at it honestly. That recognition is humbling in the extreme. It's the diagnostic moment, the realization that hits you when you're staring at your past and seeing the pattern clearly for the first time. But maintaining that connection is the ongoing, deliberate practice that transforms a flash of clarity into a sustained trajectory of growth. It's the daily, weekly, monthly work of showing up, checking in, being present, investing in the relationship, especially when other things are demanding your attention. This is not a one-time decision. It's a continuous commitment. It's a practice like meditation or exercise that compounds over time and becomes easier the more you do it, but never stops requiring intentional effort. In the end, we return to where we started, looking back at our own history and seeing it clearly. The past is not just a collection of memories. It's a map of what made us, a diagnostic tool showing us our essential components, our critical relationships, our irreplaceable connections. When we have the courage to see this clearly and the wisdom to act on it, when we can say without shame or hesitation, I need you, please stay close. We are aligning ourselves with the deepest truths of human existence. We're acknowledging that we are not islands. We are nodes in a network, and some connections in that network are so essential that without them, we cannot be who we're meant to be. This is the science. This is the emotion. This is the truth. Some people are not optional. They are essential. And recognizing that, honoring that, and acting decisively to maintain that connection is perhaps the most important work we can do in our lives.